episode of the Candice and Elisa show. We hope you've had a really good week. Candice, how have you been doing?
Oh, I've been so good. It's been so warm in Cape Town, so I
Oh,
can't
thanks.
complain. I can't
Thanks for
complain.
the reminder.
It was a low-key shade. How are you doing? How's the UK?
Yeah, the UK is cold. We're going down to -1 again this week, so that's awesome news. But speaking about news, I wanted to share some information that I found this morning about what's going on in the world. So I found that Boris Johnson has just said that he's going to be cutting foreign aid to various countries, including Yemen. And this is going from well over £100 million to about 80 or 90 million pounds. And certainly Yemen, as I don't know if all of our viewers know, but is a country that has had a war going on for countless years. People have been dying of starvation. Children have been dying of starvation and an ongoing crisis. And obviously every penny counts in those situations. He has said that it's because of the COVID pandemic, but certainly the impact is not going to be any less. On a separate matter and a bit of a lighter but not serious tone, there was also Taylor Swift, who spoke to Netflix and came out and basically said that they had been very racist, because there's now a TV show that's come out that says that one of the main characters spoke about Taylor Swift, saying that she went quicker through boyfriends than Taylor Swift. And she has said that that was an incredibly misogynist comment and, anti-feminist and all this kind of stuff. So now there's this kind of battle happening between them. So what do you think about these current affairs?
I mean, it's actually crazy to me how they're actually very different. But for me, the one thing I hear in both situations is boundaries, right? Because I think in one situation, Boris Johnson, I mean, he's probably not everyone's favorite human being. But at the same time, having said that, when we just look at it based on the economics and what's happening in the world today, it is kind of like when you're on a plane and they say, first put the oxygen mask on yourself before you help anyone else. And I think it's yes, both of us worked in the humanitarian field. We know the devastation it's going to cause in Yemen, and at the same time there has to be a plea or a need for the UK to kind of self-preserve at this time and kind of make sure that your ducks are in a row in order to be of assistance and of help to these countries moving forward. Whether we go into colonialism and how that impacted this and how we got to today, that's a completely different subject. But I think it is almost understandable, I'd even say, as to why aid needs to be reduced at this particular time and juncture. Then we come to Taylor Swift, which is, it's so interesting to me. It's so interesting that in today's day and age, right, like a man like Lionel Richie can come out and say proudly and with no judgment that he slept with 400 men. And Taylor Swift, I mean, I don't know how many men she's dated, and I don't actually, quite frankly, care. Dates people, and she becomes a running joke. It's very like, and a part of me is like, yeah, I'm glad she said something. I'm glad she was like, that's actually kind of fucking sexist, I don't know. How do you feel about it?
I mean, I think on the Taylor front, yeah, I mean, I just feel like she had to make all these songs where, I don't know her obviously, but I am assuming that a lot of her songs in the past have involved owning this side of herself and going, yeah, I've slept around, and next, that's where you have that blank space song and all this stuff. And I feel like it was a woman going, you know what, I'm going to own this. I've had a few partners. I mean, I don't think she's had that many in the end, but it's like, what does it matter? And I think that even the fact that she went out and owned it, she put it even further out in the spotlight, right? But then I think people just want to cling on to something. It's back to what we've said in episodes before, is there's got to be someone to crucify. There's got to be the scapegoat. There's got to be the woman that's doing it wrong. And Taylor Swift is, because of her fame, because I think people think she's easy to hate, she's beautiful, she's skinny, she's got all this stuff, she's easy to hate, right? Which is one of the reasons I really like her. but it's like, I just feel like we just got to move on. How many partners people have? Is it really relevant? Like, what is it? How is it affecting me? I honestly, like you said, I just don't care. On the Boris Johnson front, I mean, I think that one's more complex to me, because absolutely, I think there is a lesson to that. I mean, even when I was working as an EMT in Mexico, it's like, I remember accidents, like car accidents in the road, where you wanted to go in to help because there might be someone in a car that is in a dire strait. But if there was a gas spill, for example, we were not allowed to go in until somebody came to deal with the spill first, because if you go in and help someone and that thing goes up in flames, and you're going to have two patients or two dead people as opposed to one. And it's a very harsh kind of way of looking at it, but really it is accurate. At the same time, so I can understand why Boris Johnson is prioritizing the UK. At the same time, I question, can't he cut the budget from something else? And how is that decision making happening? And what pockets that are full at the moment could do with a little bit less without thousands of people dying from hunger? I don't know. What do you think?
I feel like it's very complex, right? It's always complex whenever we looking from the outside looking in. And I think that's why the saying, heavy is the head, because I think heavy is the head that wears the crown for so many reasons, whether that's in fame, whether that is in politics, whether, whatever it is. I mean, you and I will always tease each other and say, we know we're close to where we'd like to be in our life and in our career. And, we've got so many great ambitions. At the same time, though, at least I look at my life and I'm like, on my micro little level of, influence or work, I still find myself kind of struggling at times with people who I can kind of sense and feel have very great expectations as to what I'm supposed to contribute to their life or what I'm supposed to do for them, because now I'm speaking with Deepak Chopra or I'm doing this with this person. And there's almost this insinuation that you're supposed to help me. There's almost an entitlement to my success or my entitlement to what I've achieved, an entitlement to my life and how I make decisions and how I spend my money and how I spend my time, and like I said, very micro level, I'm very much at the bottom of the elevator right now. And I can only imagine how that expectation rises as the elevator. Yeah, maybe on the first, but I can just, imagine how that expectation and that level of this is what you should, because that's the craziest part. Like when I'd have people send me a message or whatever and say, this is how you should handle this. And I'm like, you're not even in my life. You don't even know how I'm making decisions right now. You think I didn't weigh that up? You think I was just going through life without weighing up every option before I'm making this decision? And so for me, assessing, the situation with what Boris is doing, it's like looking at it from an outside looking in and saying, I am hoping and I am assuming that this is happening because, there's no other place money can be pinched and changed and fixed and, reorientated. Because I think sometimes we fall into the mistake of saying, well, I know where public funds are going, but you have no idea how the distribution of those funds are. You don't know how, they get sent out. You don't know how they get spent. You don't know how long a period it is for that money to get sent to those places. And you also don't know, like another thing is we don't know the ripple effects of one decision, right? Yeah. Because if we can make this decision and take funding from, we can say state expenditure or whatever. And so because to us it seems frivolous and stupid and whatever, we take money from there and then it cripples another part of the economy. And so now we find ourselves in this weird limbo and balance. And so to me, just looking at it from face value and obviously not knowing what goes on in the UK economy, I would say that it would make sense. Even in South Africa, it would make sense for us to pull in our resources, and obviously our corruption is through the roof, but we pull in what we have, we fix what we have, and then we help the countries that surround us and are, within us at some point. And that only makes sense, right? Like, so I'm not mad at Boris for this one. There's a lot of reasons to be mad at him, but this one I'm not really mad at him for.
As you were speaking about this, I started thinking about Trudeau and the whole scandal issue there was with the vaccines and how Canada ordered, I think, like 5 times over the amount of vaccines that they actually needed. And certainly he's come out and said, they didn't know which ones were going to come through. They didn't know. And as it is, Canada's had trouble with getting the vaccine delivered. But then, I believe he chose Honduras as one of the countries to start giving some of the vaccines to, which is a country that hadn't even been able to start making a plan as to how any of this would happen. And you do go, okay, they overprotected, but then they can actually give from the overflow, which is kind of and the psychological principle of like heal yourself first, then give. So from that stance, absolutely. I think that does make sense. And both of us are extrapolating a little because neither one of us are like UK economists, and certainly I could not come and say this is where we should have taken the money from. But if we're just using that as a way to, you know, as we do, analyze human nature and things, I mean, I certainly think giving from the glass full is the only way, right? Because if not, you're taking out, and by the end of it, you're the one that needs to go to therapy and get your house, you know, take the flames off your house because you just completely lost sight of what was happening. Right?
You know, I agree.
My dad always says that he wants to see us disagree, and we keep struggling to find reasons to disagree. It's a problem.
We do, but I think it's just because of the way we approach life. We've got such a similar approach to life, and we both people who we can remove our emotions to get to the fact at hand, right? We're not very emotionally ruled individuals, which makes it hard to disagree because it's like one of us needs a hot head. I'm leaving. But it's true, you know, and I think you and I, it's so funny that we've both gotten into this juncture of learning boundaries, learning how to take care of ourselves before giving to others. And I think that's why maybe I'm relating to Boris so much. And I'm like, Boris, you do you, boo-boo. Because I'm just like, it's so crazy that I used to believe that, you know, or not just believe, but it was an ingrained system of operation, how I lived and moved through life, was that I need to take care of everyone, whether that was emotionally, physically, financially, whatever it may be, before I take care of myself. Yeah. Because I almost had this complete self-reliance within myself that I didn't care what I went through, I'd figure it out, or I'd stand up again, or I'd be, you know, so I had this sense of like, oh, I'm capable of being able to recover when things get hard, but this person may not be, that's why they're coming to me, right? But then I learned this, you know, philosophy of boundaries, and it was directly tied to self-value and self-worth. And when I started really reading and going into it, I was like, wait, do I value myself? How am I treating myself? How am I, like, you know, how am I valuing my work in the world, myself in the world, myself in relation to others? And when I started getting that right, I started realizing that a lot of the things I was just allowing to come through my borders, you know, I mean, Trump and I would probably get along on this point. He loves a good border. A lot of the things I was allowing in was not necessarily the things I should have been allowing in. And if anything, they chipped away at my sense of self-worth instead of adding to it. And it's been interesting, the people that have stayed in my life when I started having good borders and boundaries, and not because I'm kicking you out, but just saying, hey, you know, I'm actually in the middle of a work meeting. I cannot listen to your psychological breakdown about your boyfriend the 10th time around. Would you mind if I called you back later? And how little sometimes people understand that, where they're like, how dare you not be available for me 100 times around, you know?
Well, but
and it's so interesting.
Isn't that because we've allowed them to do that, right? Because we didn't set the boundary at the beginning, and it's a construction we realize retrospectively, and then, right?
100%. I take full accountability. And that's the thing. No, I take 100% accountability, but I also take responsibility for now erecting my fence. You know, like, yes, there's an alarm system in this beat. Yes, I've got dogs. Yes, I've got
fences. Berlin came down. Let's take a look. No, I'm joking. I get it. Yes.
That's so funny. No, but I do think it's so important, because one thing I have found, because obviously as I experience life, I posted on my social media in the terms of like quotes or like what I'm learning at this juncture in my life. And one thing I've found is that people, you know, whether they like 60 or they just like, you know, they're just starting out and they're 20 or whatever, who have all said to me, geez, boundaries are the hardest thing. Like, I didn't even know that those existed. I didn't even know I had the right to them. Isn't that insane? You didn't know you had the right to the boundaries in your own life and what you're willing to accept and not accept. And I did an interview yesterday with a woman who studies men's psychology. And so she dedicated 30 years of her life to studying and understanding men. And she said, you know, she used to think that men were these frivolous, you know, superficial creatures that roam the earth. And so she actually really went in just like hating men. And she came out on the other side understanding that, wait, men are actually not what we paint them to be. Men are actually a lot more complicated than they like to think. But at the same time, us as women are a little less complicated than we'd like to think we are. And so basically how she came around it is, with women and with men both, when we like someone and we want them to like us in return, she's like, we've got the worst boundaries. She's like, we allow them to walk rampant, whether we're attracted to them materially, physically, whatever it may be, because they've got power. She's like, we stop having boundaries. And that's the very thing that either allows men to take those boundaries and they're like, oh, well, you know, I'm a powerful man and you want to sleep with me on the first date because I asked you to. Cool. You know, like I'll be here, but I may not stick around. And she's not saying entirely that's to blame, but she was like, that's why the book Why Men Love Bitches is such a popular book. It's not that men love bitches. It's that men love a woman who's got her own thing going on, and a woman who can say, you know, I don't need you in my life, like not say it verbally, but who has a life enough to say, I respect myself, I love myself. If you're not willing to respect me and love me the way I love myself, I'm not going to stick around. And she's like, when men get conditioned enough, and this usually happens with men in power, that, like what Donald Trump said in that tape, all you have to do is grab them by the pee, right? And she's like, when men psychologically are conditioned to believe that the more power I have, the less boundaries women have, they start moving through life looking for women with no boundaries, right? Yeah. And so when they encounter a woman with stronger boundaries, you'll either find a man's going to be like, oh, she's a bitch, or a good man who actually wants commitment is going to be intrigued by her. He's going to be like, huh, you're not falling for all this wealth and this power? You know, what do you think? I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm still learning boundaries, and I do think I hope it's not a complete lifelong thing, though I tend to believe it might be. But I think, you know, setting boundaries, I grew up the same way. You know, I grew up in a Catholic country, very Catholic schools, very much about you have to give, and you're a sinner and you need confession because you've made mistakes and, you know, flagellation. And it takes a while of like seeing the world and realizing there is another way that I consider to be healthier from that particular angle. And I think that learning your weaknesses and your strengths so that you can truly understand where you need to build a wall and where you don't need that wall is really important, just to learn how to navigate through life, right? It's not just in friendships and relationships, it's also in jobs. You know, especially now during COVID, I have so many friends that have office jobs, 9 to 5s, that are really turning into like 8 to 10 p.m.s and working on the weekend and this kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, how far can I go to set a boundary without risking what I've got now that the financial times are so tough? Like, it's always a juggle. And every moment that we set a boundary, we are basically saying no to that and yes to this. And by saying no to something, I mean, that can be scary. It's like, am I missing out? Is the grass greener on the other side? And it's always the mentality that I think if you stop watering your own grass because you're looking over the ledge, yes, it's going to be greener on the other side. You know what I mean? But if you start focusing on planting your roses on your own grass, then, you know, you're going to benefit. So I think certainly that's a really important aspect and something that we're all going to have to learn on our own. But it comes with some growing pains, you know, because when you didn't have a boundary before and you've surrounded yourself by people that have set that expectation because that's the way you navigate with them, and suddenly you go, actually, this is not constructive for me. This is actually either bringing me down, or this is not bringing me up, or not raising me, or making me feel pain or sadness. You know, you gotta actually stand up for yourself. And I think much of what will determine how you walk forward is if the other person is able to acknowledge, oh, actually, that's fair enough, and we move forward and we move on. And there'll be people that go like, oh no, I had that before, I want it again. If you can't give it to me, this is it, right? And we need to be that strong. But that strength is hard because it implicates that you are willing to give something up. And we are often taught that, oh, if it goes, it's gone for life and nothing's ever going to work out. You don't know, that friend or that relationship could come back into your life in 10 years and a year when they go, actually, I miss this person or whatever, right? So we need to just chill, like take a chill pill, breathe in, find our center, understand what we need, understand our needs, set the adequate boundaries and see how it goes, you know? I mean, what do you think?
I mean, as usual, this is just something that we can really expand on. And I think we'll be speaking about this for a while because I think it is crucial for people. I think with COVID, it has actually forced us to kind of realize, oh, my energy is not this non-renewable resource, like I do need things that actually nourish me as much as I nourish these things. And I think the one thing I've been learning about setting boundaries, which has been really interesting, and I think this way I'll leave it, is the more boundaries I've set that have been healthy for me, the more I like myself. I like myself better when I'm not doing things I don't want to do. I like myself better when I'm not taking on jobs I don't want to take. So it's been really interesting, even though that fear initially kicks in. But then afterwards, I'm like, actually, I didn't have the time to do that job. I didn't have the time to go out with that friend or whatever. That usually without boundaries, I would have just been like, okay, so it may be a journey, but I think I'm liking the journey because it's the journey to myself. Like you said,
Yes.
it's saying yes to me, even though it's temporarily saying no to you, and I think that's where we'll leave it today because we could just go on because it's such a great conversation. But guys, as usual, please weigh in. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about the sexism that Taylor Swift is facing? What do you think about setting and establishing boundaries? Are you good at it? Have you been doing it for a while? Let us know, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Take care.
Bye.